Hey guys, tonight we slip into a story that's been hiding at the edge of every wave. You're half asleep already, sprawled somewhere warm, but imagine for a second you're underwater. Not the scary deep-sea kind, just a slow, warm drift under a glassy Aegean night. Threads of moonlight break the surface above like silver ladders. Tiny bubbles rise around you. And in the middle of it all, a creature no bigger than your thumb hovers in front of your face. This is Poseidon's smallest seahorse. You didn't think the god of earthquakes and storms would keep a miniature pet, but here it is, fins flicking like delicate fans, eyes huge and unbothered. You probably won't survive this journey in real life. No scuba tank, no myth insurance. But since this is bedtime history, you get free pass to ride along. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and your local time in the comments, so I can see where everyone is tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The little seahorse swivels its head, and you feel a tug, not of reins, but of invitation. You reach out. Its skin feels like cool velvet wrapped over bone no thicker than a toothpick. In Greek art, Poseidon's chariot is usually pulled by massive hippocamps, part horse, part fish, muscled and fierce. But a few crumbling vase fragments show something else entirely. A row of tiny seahorses, decorative as jewelry, harnessed like a joke at the edge of the scene. Historians still argue whether those miniature creatures were symbolic or an artist's playful flourish. Tonight, in the hush of your mind, they're real. Your tiny mount moves with a flutter, and you glide with it through water, so clear it feels like breathing. The sound is muffled. Only a distant pulse, maybe your heart, maybe the sea, echoes. As you drift, you recall that mainstream historical fact about seahorses. Ancient Greeks associated them with safe passage for sailors, tucking little bronze charms of hippocamps into nets. One quirky tidbit. Some coastal towns brewed a dubious seahorse tea from dried specimens, claiming it calmed storm fear. Basically the ancient version of placebo pill for sea anxiety. The gods probably rolled their eyes. The smallest seahorse wiggles its dorsal fin, and your body begins to move without effort. You're straddling a ripple of myth. Your hands hover above its spine, but never quite touch. Around you, pale anemones sway like slow-motion fireworks. Every so often, a crab raises a claw as if hailing a taxi. A flicker of humor crosses your mind. If Uber ever launched an undersea service, this would be it. Your guide banks left, tore an arch of coral shaped like a horseshoe. A low current hums through it, vibrating your ribs. Somewhere above, a fishing boat drifts, its shadow like a paper cutout. The line between real and story blurs. You remember a fact your high school textbook barely mentioned. The Greeks were as fascinated by the sea as by their mountains, but our surviving myths mostly talk about land heroes. The ocean stuff sits in footnotes, waiting for someone bored and drowsy enough to explore it. That's you tonight. As the two of you glide, you spot something odd. A clay amphora wedged into the sand, barnacles coating its lip. A dolphin noses it once and zips away. The seahorse circles it, as if showing off. You lean down, peering inside, and think you see scrolls. Maybe they're shopping lists, maybe love poems Poseidon never mailed. It's hard to tell underwater, and you're too polite to snoop. Another joke floats through your head. Even gods forget to send their texts. Beyond the amphora, a band of silvery fish forms an arrow, pointing east. The seahorse obeys. You drift past a slope of smooth stones, noticing patterns like writing. Historians still argue whether such formations off the Greek coast are natural or remnants of a long-vanished harbor. One theory, now mostly fringe, claims Poseidon punished the city by lowering it into the sea stone by stone, a slow cosmic eviction. The mainstream view says just tectonics, but tonight the tectonics feel personal, like the sea god's hand rearranging a chessboard. Your lungs feel no pressure. Your heartbeat slows. Around you, the ocean hush grows deeper, but never threatening. You imagine the tiny seahorse has a little to-do list. Take human on calming tour. Avoid sharks. Return before curfew. Its eye swivels back at you once, and you swear it winks. The fin flicks faster, and you accelerate, skimming a field of sand dollars. Their pale discs glow faintly, like coins of fountain. You're starting to relax into the rhythm. Every push of the seahorse's fin rocks you like a cradle. You think of ancient cradles. Archaeologists have found baby rattles shaped like little marine creatures in Greek settlements, another mainstream fact that pops up when you least expect it. Maybe some artisan had watched seahorses drift and thought, this is what calm feels like, and carved it into clay. A shadow passes overhead. A gull diving. It's called distorted underwater into a warped echo. It reminds you of a rumor. Coastal villagers once believed gull cries could predict storms, and if the gulls screamed at night, Poseidon was riding out. A quirky superstition, half remembered, still shared in taverns today. Your tiny mount dips lower, pulling you toward a dim blue glow ahead. You can't tell if it's a lantern, a jellyfish, or some artifact still humming with godly power. The sea holds its breath with you. Another joke sidles into your mind. If Greek myths had an off switch, it would probably be guarded by a creature this small. The seahorse stops, hovers, and turns. Its gaze meets yours again, and without a word you know it's time to move on, to slip past the reef gates and deeper into Poseidon's world. The current feels like a soft hand at your back, urging you forward, but you stay suspended for a moment longer, memorizing the shimmer scales, the velvet dark beyond, and the odd sense that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, even if, technically, you're lying in bed. The tiniest seahorse flicks its tail once, and you're sliding forward through a break in the coral like a doorway. Everything shifts. The light softens from silver to a muted jade, and the sound of the surface dims until you feel as though you've stepped into a library made of water. No hinges, no doors, just the reef gates, an archway of branching coral grown, so precisely it feels deliberate, like an underwater colonnade. You're not sure whether Poseidon's hand built it, or whether nature simply had a flair for Greek architecture, and historians still argue about the origins of such formations off the Cyclades. The mainstream answer is that coral just grows where currents allow. The fringe theory says they're leftover markers from a sunken cult devoted to the sea god. Tonight, they're just sleepy gates you slip past with no ticket required. Your little mount tugs you by nothing more than intention. Its dorsal fin beats with the sound of a heartbeat you almost mistake for your own. As you glide beyond the reef, the water opens into a broad expanse, and the first thing you notice is a temperature shift. It's cooler, almost crisp, like someone turned down the thermostat. You think of modern times, how you reach for a hoodie when air conditioning goes rogue, and chuckle softly. Down here, no hoodies, just goosebumps you can't see. The seahorse pauses beside a stand of black coral that looks exactly like a grove of leafless trees in winter. Nestled between branches are mussels so shiny, they reflect your face back at you like tiny funhouse mirrors. It's ridiculous and endearing. You and a thumb-sized sea steed making faces at yourself under the Aegean. One mainstream historical fact floats to the surface of your thoughts. The phrase wine-dark sea from Homer wasn't necessarily about color, but about texture and mood, dark, shifting, intoxicating. Scholars debate the translation endlessly, and you picture a conference room full of professors fighting sleep while arguing over the hue of ancient seawater. Even the seahorse seems amused, bubbles escaping from its snout in what you decide must be a laugh. It nudges you onward into a canyon of sand channels cut between coral heads. You run your fingers along one and feel an unexpected warmth. A vent, perhaps? Or just a current from a sunlit layer above. A quirky tidbit. Ancient Greek sponge divers claimed certain warm spots undersea were actually the exhalations of sleeping sea monsters, and they'd avoid harvesting there for fear of waking them. You're literally gliding over one of those warm spots now, but no monster stirs. Only a faint shimmer rising like heat off asphalt. A school of sardines bursts past, aligning with mathematical precision, a living silver ribbon. Your mount waits patiently until they've cleared, then darts forward again. In that stillness, you notice your own breathing slowing, your shoulders dropping. You're sinking into that strange zone between alertness and dream, where every sensation is muted yet sharp. Another joke drifts up. If mindfulness apps offered a mythic seahorse mode, this would be it. Automatic calm, no subscription needed. Ahead, the reef gates fully open into what looks like a plaza. Flat sand stretches out, dotted with coral outcrops like statues. Some are carved by currents into shapes you almost recognize. An arm, a horse head, maybe a lyre. Historians still argue whether early Greeks ever tried sculpting underwater, or if these are just coincidences of erosion. Either way, your eyes trace the forms and your brain fills in stories, as humans always do when staring at clouds or ceiling stains. Tonight, those shapes are soft-spoken guardians of the path you're on. The smallest seahorse dips suddenly, spiraling downward like a falling leaf. You follow weightless. At the base of the sandy plaza, an opening yawns, dark but not menacing. The current carries faint scents, saltire heavier, with a hint of iron. You think of history again. Ancient mariners reported metallic waters near certain reefs, and only recently did oceanographers confirm trace elements leaching from volcanic seams. The gods and geology overlap more than you'd think. Inside the opening, the light dims further, but in the dimness you see faint sparks. Tiny bioluminescent shrimp flicking on and off like sleepy stars. They cling to the cave ceiling, making constellations no astrologer ever charted. You point upward, and the seahorse swivels its head as if to say, "I know, they're pretty." A quirky old legend says these lights were once the souls of lost sailors guiding Poseidon's pets home. Not mainstream, but comforting nonetheless. The passage narrows, then widens again into another chamber, this one ringed by towering sea fans that ripple like drapes in a breeze. You realize you've left the noisy outer reef behind. No more popping shrimp, no more boat shadows above. Just the hush of water and your own heartbeat. The seahorse's fin slows. You mirror its rhythm and feel yourself sinking deeper into calm. It's like walking into a friend's apartment after a long city day. The difference between street noise and quiet carpets. Somewhere ahead, a muted bell sounds. Not a real bell, but the groan of shifting coral amplified by the tunnel. It resonates through your ribs. You grin at the absurdity. An underwater doorbell. Another joke forms. Poseidon probably installed it so guests wouldn't just barge in with wet feet. The sound fades, replaced by the soft crackle of distant vents. Your mount finally halts at a ledge. Below, a vast undersea plain stretches out, dotted with pale mounds like low hills. You're not supposed to recognize them, but your brain does anyway. They look like the remains of an old seabed road. In fact, a mainstream archaeological discovery off Zakynthos in 2016 revealed what seemed like ancient columns and paving stones under shallow water, later found to be a natural formation of microbial concretions. Still, historians argue whether similar sites might hide real harbors or altars yet undiscovered. Your little seahorse hovers above one of these roads, tiny fins flicking, like a guide pointing out a tourist attraction that may or may not be real. You float there, absorbing the scene. The gates are behind you now, and the Aegean's outer hush is replaced by a deeper hush. It's not frightening. It's like stepping from a noisy street into a cathedral. The light, the pressure, the muted colors, all of it says slow down. You exhale, bubbles curling upward, and feel the current brush your cheeks like cool fingers. The seahorse inches forward again, beckoning you to follow deeper into Poseidon's quieter domain. You slip further behind the tiny seahorse, the water taking on that sleepy green-blue haze of fading dream. Past the last frond of coral, the seafloor drops away into an open plain, and the dim shapes rising from it look less like rocks and more like rooftops. Your guide slows to a lazy hover, as if giving you time to adjust to what you're seeing. Down here, the sea muffles even your own thoughts, and the movement of the water is like the rise and fall of a giant chest breathing. Below, pillars tilt at awkward angles, their capitals crusted with sponges. You realize you're floating over one of those stories that surface on clickbait websites every few years. Lost Greek city found. The mainstream historical fact behind the headlines is real enough. Pavlopetri off the coast of Laconia really is the oldest submerged city yet found in the Mediterranean, dating to around 5,000 years ago. But the ruins under you now are softer, blurrier, half mythic, half geology. Historians still argue whether some of these structures glimpsed by divers are just slabs of natural limestone or evidence of forgotten sanctuaries. Tonight the debate doesn't matter. In your drowsy state, you accept them as temples to gods no one prays to anymore. Your tiny steed sways like a pendulum, nose pointing toward a broken colonnade. As you glide closer, you notice mosaics on the seafloor. No, not mosaics, but schools of brightly marked grass, arranging themselves into patterns like tiles. They scatter when you move over them, rearranging the design as if redrawing the myth each time. It's so absurd you snort a tiny laugh, bubbles escaping your nose. A modern aside drifts in. You once spent hours on your phone playing tile-matching games on the subway. Now you're literally in one, and the tiles swim away when bored. The little seahorse noses up to a stone arch barely taller than you. You duck under. Inside is a space that must once have been a courtyard. Sand drifts across carved floors. See, grass pushes through cracks like weeds in an abandoned parking lot. A quirky tidbit floats up. Some early Christian writers claim Poseidon's palaces lay under the Aegean, and that his minor servants built practice temples as blueprints for above-water sanctuaries. Scholars dismiss as allegory, but the idea of interns building underwater models of Greek architecture for the sea god makes you grin. A faint movement catches your eye, a curtain of bubbles rising from a fissure. The seahorse swims through, and you follow. Warmth brushes your face. Maybe volcanic gas. Maybe the sigh of some undersea vent. You remember an old sailor superstition. Bubbles rising from the seafloor meant the souls of drowned sailors whispering warnings. It's not mainstream, but it lingers in folk songs. You pause to listen, but hear only the hush of water, the distant echo of your heartbeat. The walls around you glow faintly. Not bioluminescence this time, but flecks of calcite reflecting stray shafts of moonlight. They shimmer like crushed mirrors, and your reflection breaks into 100 sleepy fragments. The seahorse flicks its tail impatiently, and you drift on deeper into the ruin. Each stroke feels slower now, as if time itself is dilating to match your breath. At the center of the drowned complex stands a toppled statue. Only the base remains, a hoof, a tail fin, and part of a trident. You recognize the outline of a hippocamp, the mythic seahorse hybrid Poseidon drove in art and poetry. Mainstream fact. Hippocamps were purely mythological, but Greek ship prows often bore their likeness for luck. Seeing one broken here underwater is like finding a celebrity's signature scribbled on a hidden wall. Another joke slips out. Even mythical creatures leave behind awkward photos from their early career. Your guide circles the base twice, then darts toward a stairway descending further. The steps are draped in seaweed like old velvet. Each footfall releases tiny shrimp that scatter like confetti. Historians still argue whether stairways like these led to ritual pools or simply acted as ramps for hauling boats ashore. Tonight, they're just a sleepy escalator, carrying you down into a gentler part of the dream. As you descend, the water warms again, scented faintly of minerals. Columns give way to natural stone walls. The architecture dissolves back into geology, myth returning to rock. You think of how quickly stories erode. An empire, a city, a temple, and then just fish swimming between stones. A mainstream detail drifts in. Every major port in ancient Greece had breakwaters, but most are gone now, dismantled by storms and time. Some divers call them ghost harbors. The phrase seems perfect for what you're gliding over. The stairway ends at a small terrace open to the sea. Beyond it, the plain stretches into darkness. Your seahorse hovers beside you, tail curling around a bit of coral for balance. In the silence, you imagine the bustle that might once have filled this place. Priests, merchants, maybe bored acolytes doodling hippocamps on clay shards. You half expect to hear voices, but only a muffled hum reaches you. The ocean's white noise, perfect for sleep. Your eyelids grow heavy even though they're technically open. The tiny mount flicks its fin gently, a lullaby motion. A last joke drifts up like a bubble. You paid nothing for this tour, yet you're getting a full deluxe package. Temples, mosaics, complimentary mineral spa events. You smile at the thought, and the smile carries through your body as a small shiver of comfort. The little seahorse tilts its head toward a narrow corridor lined with tall seagrass. A path of faint light glows along its base, as if marking the way to your next stop. Without words, you know the ride isn't over. You're about to leave the drowned temple behind. carrying their quiet stories with you, and slip into a place where gossip rather than stone holds the mist together. You drift with the tiniest seahorse in the corridor of tall seagrass, and the stone melts away behind you like scenery in a slow-moving stage set. The stalks wave over your head in a hypnotic rhythm, each blade tipped with tiny bubbles catching whatever scraps of moonlight manage to filter down. The water here has a softer hue, a muted turquoise that feels like late afternoon inside a swimming pool. Every few meters of grass opens into little clearings where the current hushes to a near silence. It's in one of these pockets that you first hear them. The voices. They're not loud, more like a series of overlapping whispers and giggles carried on the current. At first you think it's the ocean creaking, but then a word floats through in Greek older than any textbook you've touched. The tiny seahorse slows, dipping its head as if you've reached a quiet cafe where everyone knows everyone. You peer ahead. A stand of kelp arches into a kind of vaulted ceiling, and beneath it sit three figures no larger than you, but shimmering at the edges. Sea nymphs, or at least what your drowsy brain interprets as such. Historians still argue whether the Nereids of legend were independent myths or just poetic stand-ins for waves and breezes. Tonight, in this slow corridor, there's simply three women with fishtail hair and eyes like green glass, lounging as though waiting for a bus that never comes. One mainstream historical fact flickers in your mind. Many coastal Greek shrines included small offerings to daughters of Nereus, carved on votive plaques. They weren't official Olympian gods, but sailors hedged their bets. A quirky tidbit follows. A fragmentary cookbook from the Black Sea region mentions nymph bread. Really just seaweed cakes, supposed to curry favor with the water spirits. You imagine the nymphs before you snacking on the ancient equivalent of kale chips, and the mental image almost makes you chuckle out loud. A stream of bubbles escapes your mouth. One of the nymphs glances up, amused. They're talking quickly, voices overlapping like gossip at a hair salon. You can't understand every word, but the cadence carries a meaning. Who went where, who promised what, which god forgot which ritual. One leans toward another, miming the swing of a trident. Another covers her mouth and shakes with laughter. You realize you're eavesdropping on the ocean's rumor mill, the place where minor spirits exchange notes before anything reaches mortal ears. Your seahorse drifts closer, fins beating slower now. It seems utterly at home, like a mail carrier on a familiar route. You hang back a moment, feeling that pleasant, drowsy curiosity you get scrolling through messages at night. A modern aside drifts in. If Olympus had a social network, these nymphs would be the ones running the snarky group chat. The thought earns another silent laugh from you. The nymph nearest reaches out, trailing her fingers through the water. Little sparks rise from her touch, bioluminescent plankton, disturbed into glow. For a heartbeat, it looks like she's scattering stars across the current. Scholars debate whether ancient reports of glowing water around ships were just plankton or some lost ritual involving oils. Either way, tonight the effect is gently magical. The seahorse hovers, tail curling in a lazy spiral, waiting politely as the nymphs finish a punchline you'll never quite catch. A breeze like current brushes your shoulders, carrying a hint of salt sharper than before. You notice the nymphs are draped in strands of kelp knotted like jewelry. Tiny shells stud their hair like barrettes. One of them tilts her head at you, curious but not alarmed, then returns to her story. The sense of being invisible, a guest on the edge of another world's coffee break, is oddly soothing. You're not expected to join in, only to drift and listen. You think of a mainstream example from above water history. In classical Athens, the agora buzzed with merchants and philosophers trading ideas. Down here, the kelpgora hums with divine gossip. Your eyelids droop as you follow the rhythm of their speech, like listening to talk radio in a language you don't know, half asleep on a road trip. Another little joke floats up. NPR could stand for Nereid public rumors. The seahorse twitches its fin and starts to move again. The nymphs barely notice. One lifts a hand in a lazy farewell, trailing a string of bubbles like a departing text message. You glide past them, the sound of their chatter fading into the general hush of the water. For a moment you carry with you their easy camaraderie, a warmth in the cool current. Beyond the clearing, the sea grass thickens again. Then parts reveal a small, open area dotted with smooth stones. Each stone is etched with spirals, maybe natural, maybe carved. Historians still argue whether such patterns found on seabed rocks were art or just the work of boring mollusks. Tonight, drowsy and drifting, you decide they're little signatures left by passing nymphs, like doodles on cafe napkins. Your seahorse stops over one of these stones, tail brushing its surface. A faint pulse of light travels up the spiral and into the water, then fades. You shiver lightly, not fear, just a sensation of a secret sliding past your skin. The water tastes faintly sweeter here. The way spring water differs from tap. A final quirk drifts into your mind. Ancient Greek sailors sometimes poured wine into the sea before voyages to hear the nymphs laugh if the trip would be lucky. You don't have wine, but you have this story. You imagine uncorking a memory instead, letting it trickle out as a tribute. The nymph's laughter lingers at the edge of your hearing, like a lullaby fading into static. Your tiny guide tilts its head forward again, and you feel the unspoken cue to follow. The corridor sea grass narrows, and the light ahead brightens just enough to show another environment waiting. No longer gossip and kelp at the beginning of a delivery route. Small scrolls tied with threads of sea silk, ready for a creature exactly this small to carry. You drift after it, already sliding deeper into that gentle, timeless space where myths and dreams overlap. The narrow green corridor sea grass thins out until you and a little seahorse emerge into a quieter blue, like stepping from a crowded cafe onto an empty street at dusk. The water has that hush of Sunday mornings when everyone else is still asleep. Ahead, suspended between two coral spires, is a rack of tiny scrolls bound in strands of sea silk. They're no bigger than cinnamon sticks, sealed with droplets of wax that glimmer like pearls. Your seahorse glides straight toward them with a sense of purpose, and you finally realize this ride isn't just sightseeing. You're on a courier run. It hovers, tail curling around a coral hook, and nudges one scroll loose. The thing floats weightless, but somehow doesn't drift away. You imagine it's waterproof in the way only mythical paperwork can be. A mainstream historical fact surfaces. In classical Greece, actual messages travel by runner, ship, or trained birds. There's no evidence of aquatic postmen. Yet in vase paintings, Poseidon's attendants sometimes carry ribbon-wrapped rods or scrolls whose purpose scholars still debate. Were they ceremonial? Instructions? Ancient spam? Historians still argue whether those depictions were symbolic or hints of a lost ritual. Tonight the debate resolves into this scene. A thumb-sized steed with male duty. It flicks its fin and begins swimming with the scroll balanced neatly across its snout. You follow, half amused, half entranced. The current here is steady, like a moving walkway at an airport. You grin at the modernity of the thought. If this is a mythical FedEx, you're riding shotgun. The seahorse seems unbothered by your presence, adjusting its course with tiny gestures. Its confidence feels like a lullaby, each movement slow, efficient, calm. You drift past a formation of low domes covered in pink coral. In the gaps between them, little cleaner shrimp pop in and out like shopkeepers opening shutters. A quirky tidbit bubbles up. A fragmentary legend from the island of Delos tells of the silver script of the sea carried on the backs of minnows of the god. Scholars dismissed it as poetry until a 19th century sponge diver claimed to have seen letters swimming between reefs. Probably a tall tale, but here you are, literally following one. The route turns through a canyon of narrow pearl-colored walls. They curve and undulate, forming natural arches. As you pass under one, faint hums echo, low tones like a distant cello. Scientists today know that certain fish produce low-frequency sounds, but ancient sailors called it the reading voice of the sea. Another debate. Some think those hums inspired the idea of prophetic oracles underwater. Whatever the origin, it's a soporific soundtrack. You feel your breathing sink to it, your thoughts stretching like taffy. Every few meters, a seahorse pauses to check its cargo. It taps the wax seal gently with its snout, as though confirming it's intact. You imagine it's carrying invites to some minor oceanic ceremony, or maybe IOUs from Poseidon and other gods. Another little joke floats up. Divine bureaucracy never sleeps. Except, apparently, you, right now, try not to. A bubble escapes your nose with a sleepy laugh. You pass a cluster of amphorae half buried in sand. Their mouths ring with sponges. They look like a row of mailboxes. In one, an octopus sits with tentacles spread, examining a shell as though reading it. It glances at you and then resumes whatever it's doing, unimpressed. Mainstream fact: octopuses really are curious and will manipulate objects, leading ancient Greeks to nickname them stone lovers. Some fringe enthusiasts think they inspired myths of undersea scribes. Staring at this one, you can almost believe it. The water deepens slightly, taking on a cooler tint. Shafts of light angle down like spotlights. Your seahorse rises into one, its tiny body glowing gold for a moment before fading back to brown. The scroll still balanced. It glances at you with one swiveling eye, and you sense a question. Are you keeping up? You flutter your fingers in the current, pretending to paddle. It seems satisfied. You remember another mainstream tidbit. The Greeks used wax tablets for notes they'd erase and reuse, like ancient etch-a-sketches. Looking at the glowing scroll, you wonder the gods had some reusable system of their own. Salt dissolving ink at delivery, messages evaporating like foam. Historians still argue whether myths of vanishing letters were metaphors or hints at rituals lost to time. Down here, the question feels less important than the movement itself. The tiny courier carrying something fragile through an endless sea. The canyon opens into a flat expanse dotted with towering sponges shaped like urns. They sway slowly, filtering water. The seahorse darts between them, knowing exactly which path to take. You trail after, half expecting to see signposts or mile markers. Instead, you spot little shells arranged in arrows, maybe left by previous couriers. Or maybe the current did it. Your drowsy brain doesn't care. It's enough to follow. Another quirk drifts into memory. A late Roman writer mentioned, seahorses that sing when burdened with news. Scholars call it fanciful. But as you watch your mount's gills flare, a faint vibration hums through the water, like a cat purring. Maybe it's just current, maybe not. Either way, the sound works on you like a white noise machine. Your shoulders slacken, your thoughts slow. At last, a small anemone ring grotto appears ahead, its entrance glowing faintly green. The seahorse pauses outside, adjusts the scroll, then glides in. You follow, ducking under the low ceiling. Inside it's warmer, lined with smooth stones etched with spirals. This must be a drop point. Your mount slips behind a rock, reappears without the scroll, and wiggles its fins with what you swear is relief. Even mythic couriers feel the weight of errands. It circles you once, then heads toward a tunnel at the back of the grotto, tail flicking like punctuation. The job done, the ride continues. You feel a gentle anticipation, not adrenaline, but that quiet eagerness you get after ticking something off to-do list. The ocean around you holds its breath, waiting to show you the next odd companion on this sleepy route. The tunnel out of the little drop point curves like a nautilus shell, spiraling upward before leveling out. The water here feels different. Warmer, full of tiny sparks that drift like snow but never melt. Your seahorse flicks its fins faster, as if excited about the next stop. Ahead, a soft clicking rises, like pebbles tumbling in a drum. Out of the blue appears a sleek gray shape, a dolphin gliding sideways to keep eye contact with you, one eyebrow ridge cocked in amusement. It swims a lazy circle around you and the seahorse, then blows a ring of bubbles that expands and drifts upward like a silver halo. In real life, dolphins are playful but busy. Here this one moves with unhurried grace, where what you can only call a diplomat's expression. You remember a mainstream fact. In a few late Greek tales, dolphins were said to act as messengers or rescuers for Apollo and Poseidon, guiding lost sailors ashore. Some even have names and inscriptions, Delphinos, Phokas, hinting at cult status. Historians still argue whether those names reflect real cults or just poetic epithets. Underwater, this ambiguity becomes a living creature right beside you. The dolphin tilts its head, emitting a sequence of clicks and whistles. You don't understand the words, but the tone is unmistakably wry, as if it's saying, another rookie courier on Poseidon's errands? Your seahorse snorts a tiny bubble in response. The two clearly know each other. The dolphin gestures with its beak and begins to swim ahead, inviting you to follow. Together you pass through a corridor of kelp so tall it looks like a sunken colonnade. The dolphin keeps pace just off your shoulder, sometimes rolling to show the pale curve of its belly. It seems to enjoy lecturing. With each click it points its fin at some detail, a mound of amphory, A marble fragment, a cluster of starfish shaped like old coins. In your head, you translate. Here, traders once lost a cargo of wine. Here, a storm sank a temple barge. The mainstream facts float up. Wine and amphory really do litter the Mediterranean. A few ancient shipwrecks show offerings to Poseidon. Some had carved dolphins on their prows. Scholars disagree on whether those carvings were for luck for the god or just decoration. The dolphin slows at a small outcrop shaped like an altar. It nudges a piece of coral loose, revealing a plaque of slate etched with spiral grooves. It emits a long, slow whistle that seems to resonate in your ribs. The grooves shimmer briefly as though recalling some long-forgotten hymn. Perhaps it's a ritual nobody has performed in 2,000 years, or perhaps it's just a natural pattern. You find your eyelids heavier. The sound acts like a lullaby. The little seahorse hovers at your side, watching you and the dolphin with equal curiosity. Its eye swivels, as though it too is learning. The dolphin finishes its note and looks back. A bubble escapes your lips in a soft laugh. You've just received a lecture from a mythic marine historian. As you drift on, the corridor opens into a wide plain of sand. Patches of purple sea anemones pulse gently, like breathing pillows. The dolphin circles one last time, gives a final series of clicks that sound like good luck in some universal tongue, then vanishes into a shaft of light, leaving only a swirl of silvery bubbles. Your seahorse spins slowly, as if to wave farewell, then resumes its course across the sandy plain. Mainstream tidbit. In actual dolphin behavior, bubble rings can be a form of play or communication. In Greek art, bubbles are rarely depicted. Water scenes were stylized, but later Roman mosaics sometimes show tiny circles near dolphin mouths. Historians debate if that indicates real observation or decorative flair. Here, in the soft dream current, the bubbles are both fact and flourish. The seahorse leads you toward a cluster of low mounds. At first they look like dunes, but as you draw closer they reveal themselves as pearl-coated canyons. Walls so smooth they mirror the light. The current slows to a lazy drift, and you feel your heartbeat slowing with it. You're about in a maze of pearl canyons the courier route is famous for, where stories fold on themselves and time behaves like a sleeping tide. You and the seahorse slip between the first two pearl-coated ridges, as though entering a secret hallway in a palace built entirely from moonlight. The walls rise high above, shimmering with faint rainbows that ripple when your fingers brush them. Even the sound of your breathing feels muffled here, like a library beneath the sea. The seahorse's tail curls and uncurls with practiced precision, guiding you deeper into the labyrinth. You think of real underwater canyons, Crete's submarine ridges, the caldera off Santorini, places where geologists have mapped jagged ledges and ancient fault lines. Historians still argue whether these zones inspired the earliest stories of labyrinths, or if the myths were purely land-based echoes of palace architecture like Knossos. Your guide pauses near an archway where the pearl coating is peeled away, revealing basalt veins beneath. The color shifts from opal to midnight, and a cool current snakes past your ankles. As you drift forward, a faint chime reaches your ears. It's not metal, it's shells knocking gently in the current. The sound loops, hypnotic, like an old screensaver for your brain. You smile at the accidental music, somewhere between a wind chime and a lullaby. This is your first light joke moment. You think, if Poseidon's smallest seahorse ever wanted a side hustle, it could sell relaxation labyrinth tours to stressed-out gods. The corridor narrows, forcing you to brush close to the walls. The pearl dust sticks to your fingertips like fine glitter. You recall a mainstream fact. In certain sanctuaries dedicated to Aphrodite and to sea deities, ancient pilgrims left shells or pearls as offerings. Archaeologists have found piles of them, but not always recorded their original arrangement. Some scholars propose the piles formed patterns or labyrinths now lost. Others insist they were just dumped, no symbolism intended. The ambiguity matches the curling passages you're gliding through now. Intention or accident, who can say? You pass a hollow where tiny creatures flicker in and out like living punctuation marks. They're amphipods no bigger than sesame seeds, glowing turquoise. Your seahorse darts after them, then thinks better of it. The glow clings to its snout, making it look like it's wearing a neon mustache. That's your second small joke. Even mythic mounts can't resist a novelty glow stick. The Seahorse shakes its head, sending off blue sparks that drift down like birthday confetti. At a junction where 3 corridors meet, an old stone marker stands, a pillar carved with spirals and dolphin motifs. The carvings are eroded, but you can make out a crude map of lines crossing like the threads of a net. You run a hand over it, and for a moment you feel a pulse, as if some memory stored inside is checking to see who you are. Your heartbeat slows in response. The Seahorse waits patiently, head tilted, giving you time to absorb the atmosphere. A quirky tidbit surfaces from your own memory. A few 19th century divers claim to have found pearl labyrinths off the coast of Cyprus, corridors of mother-of-pearl apparently built by unknown hands. Later surveys found nothing but ordinary oyster beds. Were those divers hallucinating from nitrogen narcosis, or exaggerating for fame? No one knows. Yet the story persists in fringe diving forums, a myth layered atop a myth. Now, as you travel deeper into the gleaming maze, the fringe feels real enough to touch. The corridor widens unexpectedly into a domed chamber where the ceiling is a mirror of water. Small bubbles cling upside down above you, catching and refracting the faint light. Your reflection looks drowsy, eyes half closed. The Seahorse circles once, then aims for an exit on the far side. The movement stirs a cloud of pearl dust that swirls like slow snowfall. You think about how the Greeks called the sea wine dark, but here it's milk pale, a reversal that makes you feel like you're inside a dream of a dream. Third light joke. You mutter to yourself, somebody should tell Homer his color palette is off. The Seahorse flicks its tail as if in agreement. You glide onward. The walls begin to show inlaid scenes, tiny tesserae of coral and shell-forming mosaics. They depict not heroes but mundane tasks. A child feeding fish, a woman braiding seaweed ropes, a satyr napping on a rock. It's like a sleepy comic strip of underwater everyday life. Perhaps a forgotten artist wanted to remind travelers that not every mythic moment was dramatic. The details are so ordinary you almost laugh. And yet, mainstream archaeology sometimes unearths exactly these quiet images on Greek vases. Farmers at rest, shepherds playing games, proving myths in daily life constantly bled into one another. Historians debate whether such images were filler or encoded messages to viewers. At last, the labyrinth narrows again, and the current grows warmer, hinting at volcanic activity somewhere ahead. You feel the Seahorse's body tense, its fins beating faster. The pearl walls thin out, replaced by darker rock veined with glowing orange streaks. The sounds shift from chimes to a low, steady hum, like the bass note of the sea itself. You sense you're on the threshold of another story zone, one touched by fire rather than pearl. A final glance back shows the corridor fading into soft opal light. You've threaded through shimmering canyons where history and speculation blur, guided by a creature smaller than your hand. Your muscles feel loose, your eyelids heavy. Ahead waits a vent of warmth, or perhaps the next legend, Hephaestus' lost forge, or just a hot spring for passing fish. Either way, the Seahorse tilts forward, ready to dive. The water ahead grows velvet dark and carries a faint metallic tang that coats your tongue. Each breath through your regulator feels warmer, like sipping tea under the sea. Your tiny Seahorse straightens its back fins, an almost military posture, then flicks forward toward a curtain of rising bubbles. They shimmer copper and gold as they escape from cracks in the seafloor, making the whole trench look like a champagne fountain. In real life, the Aegean is studded with hydrothermal vents, and some of them sit right on the edges of ancient trade routes. Historians still argue whether mariners of antiquity actually knew about these vents or just wove stories about fire beneath the sea from volcanic islands like Santorini. You duck under an arch of basalt, and the temperature jumps a few degrees. The Seahorse slows so you can acclimate. Here the light dims to a deep russet. Glowing bacteria paint the rocks with faint strokes of orange and green, a natural graffiti no one has to scrub off. Mainstream fact. Hephaestus, the smith god, was said to have his forge under a volcano, usually Mount Etna, but some late myths place his lesser workshops beneath the sea, explaining the hiss and bubble events. The warmth now licking your palms makes the idea strangely plausible. A faint hammering echoes through the rock. It's rhythmic but gentle, like someone tapping a spoon on a mug in another room. The sound is your first light joke cue. You imagine Hephaestus working a night shift in fuzzy slippers, sipping coffee between sparks. Your seahorse pauses at the edge of a glowing chimney and peers up like a tourist gawking at a skyscraper. You drift around the chimney, seeing how the bubbles form perfect rings before collapsing. That sparks a quirky tidbit. In the 1970s, a French submersible crew claimed to see rings of flame at a Mediterranean vent, thinking they found a mythical forge. Later analysis suggested chemical luminescence from rare plankton, whether exaggeration or discovery. The report still pops up in footnotes. Now, the same phenomenon curls around you as soft orange halos. Your seahorse darts into a side alcove where the rock smooths out into an amphitheater shape. Tiny crabs scuttle in lines, their shells mottled like old bronze coins. In the center sits a block of pumice carved with something like a workbench, a slab dotted with pits and grooves. Perhaps natural, perhaps not. You run a hand over it and feel faint warmth seeping up. You picture mythic tools once resting there, or maybe just centuries of lava bubbles. Historians still debate whether such seafloor features influence the idea of underwater palaces. Some call it pareidolia. Others see real evidence of ritual sites drowned by seismic shifts. Another current drifts in, carrying the smell of sulfur mingled with salt. It makes you drowsy, like a warm bath spiked with minerals. The seahorse noses at a crack, releasing a fresh plume of warm water. It curls around you like a shawl. Second light joke, you mutter, Poseidon really should install a spa sign here. Volcanic plunge free of charge. The seahorse's tiny fins flutter as if chuckling. Above, the basalt ceiling thins and shafts of daylight filter down through cracks. You glimpse silhouettes of fish passing overhead. Their fins lift from below like stained glass. The view reminds you that myths often mirror nature. Even the most dramatic story starts from an observation, a glow, a sound, a smell that sailors couldn't explain. Over time, those observations turn into gods' workplaces, curses, or secret passages. You press onward through a series of events that is softly, each one a miniature geyser. The seahorse leads you across a narrow bridge of rock where hot and cold currents meet. The sensation is like stepping from a sauna into a cool hallway and back again. Third light joke. You think about how ancient heroes had to prove themselves by walking on fire, and here you're basically doing the underwater version in your pajamas of thought. Beyond the vents, the rock gives way to a sandy terrace studded with black stones like buttons on a coat. The water cools again and your skin tingles. In the distance you hear a hollow creak, the sound of shipwreck shifting on the seabed. The seahorse pauses, its head cocked, as though listening to a memory. You realize you're leaving the warmth of Hephaestus' supposed forge and gliding toward another zone, where old hulls and sailors' dreams lie layered like pages of forgotten diary. You glance back at the vent one last time. The bubbles still rise, glowing faintly, like sparks from a slow fire. Whether a god's forge or just geology, the effect is hypnotic, lulling your thoughts into slower loops. The seahorse flicks its tail and heads off toward the muffled creaking, pulling you gently along. Your eyelids droop, your muscles loosen, and your mind drifts toward the next story waiting in the dark water ahead, listening to shipwrecked dreams. The warmth fades behind you like the echo of a bathhouse door closing, and the water ahead turns a cool, glassy blue. The sound that drew you onward, the hollow creak, becomes clearer with each flick of the seahorse's fins. It's the timbre of old timber under pressure, a noise both fragile and stubborn. Your tiny guide slows as though entering a cathedral of ghosts. Around you loom the shapes of hulls lying on their sides, ribs splayed like giant fish skeletons. Some are recognizably triremes, others anonymous barges, all softened by centuries of silt and coral. Your eyes catch a glint. A bronze ram still fixed to a prow, green with patina, but sharp as a shark's nose. Mainstream fact. Archaeologists have indeed recovered bronze rams from ancient Greek warships, sometimes inscribed with names or dedicatory phrases to Poseidon. Historians still argue whether these inscriptions were prayers before battle or thanks after victory. Here under the hush of the sea, they read like whispered apologies. You drift closer to a merchant vessel's cargo spill, amphorae tipped on their sides, sealed with barnacles like old wax seals. One is cracked open, spilling not wine but tiny fish that have turned the jar into a nursery. The smell of silt and salt is faint but earthy, like a damp attic. The Seahorse circles a pot and peeks inside, tail curling with curiosity. That's your first light joke cue. You imagine it writing a tiny review, accommodation adequate, but amphora too cramped for family of 5. A few meters off lies a stone anchor shaped like a capital T. You run your fingers along its edge, feeling grooves worn by rope. A quirky tidbit drifts up. Some sailors in late antiquity carved eyes onto their anchors, so they would see hazards beneath the water. A few such anchors have been found off the Levant coast. Whether superstition, art, or a way to personalize gear, no one can say. You imagine the anchors here blinking in sleep, keeping silent watch over the wrecks. The Seahorse leads you deeper between two hulls. Here the seabed rises into small dunes covered with seagrass. Patches of purple tunicates glow faintly like low-watt nightlights. In a depression, you spot something stranger, a marble head half buried, its blank eyes open. For a moment, you think it turns toward you, but it's only the current shifting sand. Historians still debate how so many statues ended up underwater. Storm losses, shipwreck cargo, or deliberate offerings sunk to placate the sea. Each theory holds a piece of truth, but not the whole mosaic. Above, a shoal of sardines moves as one body. Silver flashes like Morse code. They surge over a toppled mast and vanish into a hatch. The mast is encrusted with coral that forms accidental letters, spelling nothing but looking like a secret script. Your second light joke. You imagine aboard coral polyps slowly writing, send snacks. Over centuries, the Seahorse hovers as if reading too, then snorts a bubble. Near the edge of the wreck field, you find a bell. It's small bronze, still attached to a splintered deck. You tap it lightly and a dull note resonates through the water. The vibration seems to travel into your chest, a heartbeat matching yours. The Seahorse pauses, fins barely moving. The bell tone fades into silence, replaced by the gentle hiss of sand shifting. The moment feels like a doorway between stories, as if the shipwreck itself is trying to speak. You remember a mainstream superstition. Greek sailors sometimes tied bits of bread or hair into knots and dropped them overboard as memory anchors, offerings to lost crewmates. A few ancient texts mention it, but archaeologists have yet to find physical proof. Historians still argue whether it was real practice or poetic invention. As you drift past the bell, you think of countless tiny rituals lost like bubbles, rising once and vanishing. The wreck field ends at a soft slope, leading into a trench of darker water. The sand becomes finer, like powdered marble, and your Seahorse's fins leave little spirals in it. Third light joke. You mutter, we're basically the world's slowest deep-sea Uber. And the Seahorse flicks its tail like a driver unimpressed by your rating. A soft current pushes from below, cool and steady, like an elevator's breath. This is a wine-dark trench you glimpsed on the courier map, a place sailors once feared but never saw. Even in myth at the borderland, the unknown between shallows and the true deep, the Seahorse points its snout downward, waiting for your nod. You glance back at the silent wrecks, amphorae glinting like faint stars, then forward into the blue-black mouth of the trench. The air in your lungs feels heavier but calmer. With a slow kick you follow, descending alongside your miniature mount. The sound of creaking timbers fades, replaced by a low hum from the earth itself. Your eyelids droop a little more. Your heartbeat slows to match the trench's pulse. Whatever stories wait below will be told at the pace of the deep, in a register only half heard by waking minds. The light thins as you and the little Seahorse tilt nose down into the wine-dark trench. Above, the wrecks become silhouettes, then vanish behind a curtain of blue-black. Down here the water feels thicker, as if you're gliding through ink instead of salt. The sound shifts too, no more creaks or bubbles, only a long, low hum like someone humming into a conch shell. Your miniature mount flicks its fins steadily, unbothered, tail curled like a question mark. You blink and realize how your own breathing has slowed, matching the rhythm of the trench. A mainstream fact surfaces. Ancient Greek writers often describe the open sea as oinops pontos, the wine-dark sea. Scholars still debate why, whether because of sunset light on waves, a mistranslation of dark like wine, or some lost color category. In this trench, you finally see why such a phrase made sense. The water glows with muted burgundy tint that no modern Pantone chart can name. A soft glimmer appears ahead. Clusters of tiny jellyfish pulsing like floating paper lanterns. Their bells flash in slow synchrony, making a path downwards. Your seahorse follows without hesitation. That's your first light joke. You whisper, "Great, our GPS is now a jellyfish disco." The seahorse gives a tiny snore of bubbles. The trench walls rise on either side, streaked with manganese nodules that glitter like coins. You run your hand along one. It leaves a faint metallic taste on your fingertips. A quirky tidbit drifts into memory. Some fringe theorists claim these nodules inspire the idea of hidden treasure under the sea, natural coins waiting for a mythic king. There's no proof, but the resemblance is eerie as the nodules glint like drachmas in the lantern light. The current presses slightly, a downward invitation. You feel your ears pop softly as the pressure increases. The seahorse pauses at a ledge, letting you adjust. Below, you glimpse shapes that might be pillars or simply eroded spires of basalt. Historians still argue whether certain deep-sea formations mapped by submersibles are natural or remnants of drowned structures. The debate echoes Plato's Atlantis story, itself a blend of possible history and moral allegory. Here the ambiguity feels almost comforting. You don't have to choose an answer. You descend past a ledge where a slow cloud of plankton drifts, glowing faintly blue. The seahorse swims through it like confetti. Second light joke. You imagine it swimming through a midnight cereal commercial, part of a balanced, godly breakfast. The plankton coat your hands with a brief sparkle, then fade. The trench narrows briefly, then opens into a cavern where the floor is carpeted with pale sand. The only sound is your heartbeat and a faint clicking far off. In the center stand a column of rising bubbles, colder than the vents above, almost icy. It spirals like smoke in reverse. You drift closer, feeling the water's chill on your cheeks. The column smells faintly of iron, like rain on stone. Perhaps a deep spring, perhaps a fissure. You think of myths where rivers of the underworld surface briefly in the mortal realm. This feels like an aquatic version, a neutral border between the known and unknown. Above the column hover 3 giant stingrays, their wings undulating slowly like monks bowing. They don't seem to notice you. Their movements stir soft currents that brush your hair like fingers. Your seahorse hovers behind you, tail coiled tightly. You wonder if this is part of its regular route or an unscheduled detour. Third light joke. You murmur, "Great, now we've stumbled into a secret boss level." And the seahorse's eye swivels back as if rolling in exasperation. You drift along the edge of the cavern, letting your fingertips skim the sand. It's cool and velvety, grains finer than flour. Mixed among them are tiny shards of pottery, each painted with a line or dot. Could be nothing more than random erosion or fragments of a lost votive bowl. Mainstream archaeology has indeed found deep-sea sherds carried far by currents. Historians still argue whether their depth means ancient jettisoning, seismic activity, or simply slow slide off continental shelves. Beyond the cavern, a tunnel slopes gently upward, lit by faint phosphorescence. The water warms a fraction, signaling you're leaving the trench's coldest reach. Your seahorse leads you into the tunnel. The glow intensifies, and you begin to hear distant, airy music, like conch shells blown in long tones, overlaid with the clink of shells. It might be your mind playing tricks from the low pressure, or it might be something else, a festival of some minor sea spirits the dolphin mentioned in passing. You glance back at the cavern one last time. The column of bubbles continues to rise, indifferent, while the stingrays hover like punctuation marks at the end of a quiet sentence. You feel a deep exhale escape you, a small surrender to the slow story of the deep. The tunnel ahead smells faintly sweet, like crushed kelp in sunlight. You're ascending now, following your seahorse towards sound and light, leaving the wine dark unknown for a gentler myth above. You emerge in the trench's tunnel into a pale green amphitheater of water. So spacious, and still feels like drifting inside a soap bubble. The current slackens to almost nothing. Above you, daylight filters down through 100 small openings in the rocky ceiling, each beam carrying dust-like plankton that turns to glitter when stirred. Your tiny seahorse pauses at the threshold, then flicks its fins once in a deliberate, ceremonial motion. Ahead floats a scene unlike any you've encountered yet. Thousands of shells, scallops, clams, spirals, even nautilus fragments, hovering and turning slowly in place, as if strung on invisible threads. They clink softly against one another, making a sound like distant wind chimes. At first you think it's random, but after a moment you hear a pattern. Slow, rolling measures like the beginning of a lullaby. A mainstream fact flickers in your mind. Ancient coastal Greeks sometimes used shells as rattles or small percussion in ritual dances. Archaeologists have found pierced shells in sanctuaries, perhaps worn as anklets or shaken to produce sound. Historians still argue whether these were children's toys, ritual objects, or both. Here, the ambiguity blossoms into a full-blown underwater orchestra. Minor sea spirits, no larger than your palm, flit between the shells, translucent and slow as drifting seeds. They wear no crowns, no tridents. Instead, they carry little strands of seaweed, weaving them into loops and releasing them to float upward. The loops drift like bubbles, popping gently when they touch a shell and making a soft ting. Your seahorse swims a lazy circle among them, and you realize this is a festival, a calm, ongoing celebration the dolphin hinted at, where offerings and memories float instead of sink. Your first light joke rises naturally. You whisper, "Looks like Poseidon's smallest seahorse brought us to an underwater craft fair." The seahorse gives a tiny snore of bubbles and arches its neck, clearly proud of the detour. You drift forward slowly, letting a spiral shell brush your fingers. It's cool and slightly rough, but inside you hear a faint hum, like a conch pressing your ear. A quirky tidbit surfaces. In some fringe maritime folklore, people believe shells collected sea songs that could be released if you cracked them open at midnight. No evidence supports it, but the story persists in obscure footnotes in fishing villages. Here, surrounded by chiming shells, it doesn't feel far-fetched. One of the sea spirits glides near and places a loop of seaweed over the seahorse's snout like a garland. The creature holds still, then flicks its tail, releasing a puff of green glitter that drifts upward. Your second light joke. You imagine the seahorse reluctantly modeling this season's hottest kelp accessory for some mythical fashion blog. All around, the shells begin to rotate in synchrony, creating gentle swirls that tickle your skin. The pattern resembles a mandala or maybe a labyrinth, echoing the pearl canyons you just left. It's hypnotic, a slow ballet of inanimate objects animated by unseen currents. A mainstream fact about labyrinths bubbles up. The floor mosaic at Knossos shows coiling patterns thought to represent dance steps as much as architecture. Historians still argue whether such patterns encoded myths or just look pretty. Now, underwater, the debate feels irrelevant. The beauty alone does the work. The music of shells softens, becoming more like a distant heartbeat than chimes. You feel your shoulders sink, your jaw unclench. The sea spirits retreat into the beams of light, fading until only the shells remain, still turning. Third light joke. You murmur, "Best sleep soundtrack ever." Spotify could never, and the seahorse tilts its head as if to agree. As you drift through the final ring of shells, one brushes your palm and stays there a moment, as if gifting you its vibration. Then it lets go, rising slowly toward the ceiling of holes where daylight spills like syrup. The seahorse swings back toward a shadowed passage at the far end of the amphitheater, flicking its tail to say, "Time to move." You take one last look at the floating festival. Shells turning, light filtering, currents whispering. Whether a true ritual or just the ocean playing, you've witnessed a celebration of slowness, a myth in no hurry to be believed. Beyond the chamber, a narrower corridor opens. The water cools slightly and small black shapes stud the floor, sea urchins forming a natural obstacle course. The seahorse quickens, clearly eager for the next challenge, its tail uncurling like a spring. You feel your limbs heavy but alert, like someone halfway between dream and waking. The sound of clinking shells fades behind you, replaced by the faint crackle of urchin spines brushing rock. The festival recedes, and the test ahead beckons. The corridor narrows until it feels like you're sliding through a long, velvet sleeve of water. Ahead, a patchwork of black dots shifts across the pale sand, sea urchins, their spines swaying like tiny quills. Your little seahorse slows, its fins fanning in short, precise strokes. You sense a kind of alertness in its body, a quiet readiness, the way a cat arches before leaping onto a shelf. You can't help a small joke. Great, an undersea game of hopscotch, but with needles. The Seahorse lets out a stream of bubbles that might be a sigh. The urchins aren't just scattered. They form rows and spirals like a pattern. Some are violet, others a deep midnight blue, a few glowing faintly with bioluminescent dots. As you hover above them, the glow pulses, almost like a string of runway lights telling the Seahorse where to go. A mainstream fact surfaces. In the sanctuary of Delphi, priests sometimes laid out small stones and ritual paths for initiates to follow blindfolded. Historians still argue whether these step patterns had symbolic meaning or simply kept crowds orderly. Here, the urchins echo that mystery, creating a living labyrinth. The Seahorse tenses, then darts forward in a gentle zigzag, weaving through the first row of spines without touching a single one. You grip its tiny dorsal fin lightly as it tilts and spirals, an underwater slalom. Your second light joke bubbles up. Poseidon's smallest seahorse, star of the next Olympic obstacle event. Midway through, a lone urchin sits apart from the rest. Its spines are pale gold rather than black. A quirky tidbit drifts into your memory. In some fringe antiquarian circles, golden urchin shells have been claimed as sun relics washed from Atlantis. No proof, of course, but enough to fuel late-night forums. The sight of this one glowing softly in the dim corridor feels like stumbling across a whispered rumor in physical form. Your Seahorse pauses beside it, curling its tail around a small pebble, and you notice a carved swirl on the stone, as if a human hand had once marked it. The groove is filled with fine sand. Did someone pass this way long ago, mapping a route through the urchins? Historians still argue whether certain Mediterranean divers left underwater markers to claim sponge fields or if natural erosion carved such shapes. Here, it's just another question suspended like silt. You lean closer, watching the Seahorse's gills flick. It nudges a golden urchin gently, and a tiny puff of phosphorescent dust drifts upward, swirling around your fingers like glow-stick confetti. Your third light joke whispers out, "Well, that's one way to get glitter on your nails for free." Beyond the golden sentinel, the obstacle course intensifies. Urchins arrange like teeth around narrow passages, small currents pushing unpredictably. Yet the Seahorse moves with a calm born of habit, curling its tail for sudden turns, flicking its fins to hover. You feel yourself moving with it, your body loose, your breath slow. It's like balancing on a rocking chair while half asleep. Effortless once you surrender. At one point, a soft vibration trembles through the corridor, like a distant drum. You glance up and see a faint shadow, perhaps a large fish, perhaps a drifting net. The sound fades. You recall a mainstream fact about ancient fishermen singing or drumming on boat hulls to herd fish toward nets. Some coastal communities still use rhythm underwater to attract or repel creatures. Whether that's what you heard or just the sea shifting, it blends into the obstacle's rhythm. Gradually, the rows of urchins thin. The glow dims. Ahead, pale sand opens like a stage with no props. Your Seahorse slows, then gives a final flick of its tail, clearing the last cluster with a flourish. You both drift into a small clearing where the water feels warmer and slightly sweet, as if touched by a spring. The corridor behind you glimmers faintly with the bioluminescent pattern of the course you've just completed, like looking back at a sleepy arcade game you didn't realize you'd mastered. You exhale a small laugh, half relief, half pride. The Seahorse spins once in place, clearly pleased with itself. It feels like you've just shared a secret ritual no one else knows, a test designed for tiny mounts and oversized passengers who trust them. The question of who built or arranged these urchins lingers, but your eyelids feel heavy, and you're content to let it remain a mystery for now. Ahead, the corridor widens again, lightening to a soft turquoise glow. The water carries a faint scent, if scent can be said to exist here, of minerals and something metallic. You hear a low rumble, a pulse of heat rising from below. Your little companion turns its snout toward it with interest, as though sensing another detour. You realize you're approaching a volcanic vent, the next leg of your meander through forgotten myths. The turquoise glow ahead blooms into a broad, sunlit basin where the ceiling of rock thins and shafts of daylight pour down like liquid glass. After the warmth of the vent you just left, the water here feels cooler, tinged with salt and the faint metallic tang of open sea. Your little seahorse flicks its fins once and rises, spiraling upward in a slow helix. You follow, your body feeling both weightless and heavy, like a kite in slow motion. Far above, shadows of islands waver on the surface. Fuzzy outlines of olive groves, low white houses, and ragged cliffs. The currents here are gentle but restless, like someone breathing under a blanket. Your seahorse angles toward a column of rock pierced by several openings. Each one emits a faint, echoing hum, like the bass notes of an organ. The sound isn't random. You recognize a 3-beat rhythm, the same pattern you heard back at the Floating Shell Festival. Poseidon's smallest seahorse knows its playlist. You mutter your first light joke of the section. You slip into one of the openings and emerge in a cavern open on one side to the sea. In the silt below lie terracotta shards, bronze nails, and the ghost lines of old hulls. A mainstream fact surfaces. Greek shipbuilders often beach their vessels for repairs on small islets before long voyages. Historians still argue whether some of these remote coves doubled as secret cult sites where offerings were made to sea gods. Here, the overlap feels tangible. Broken amphorae half buried like offering bowls. Timbers arranged like altars by chance or by ritual. Your seahorse drifts over a particularly intact amphora with a dolphin painted on it. The paint has faded to a ghostly outline, but the shape is still clear. A quirky tidbit rises. A handful of ancient jars discovered off the coast of Alanissos contain not wine or oil, but preserved cuttlefish ink, possibly used for dye or even early writing underwater. No one can quite explain why a merchant would risk shipping vat of ink. The thought of someone smuggling squid ink diaries through these waters makes you smile. You float higher, breaking out a cavern into open water just below the surface. Above you, the bottom of a fishing boat glides past, its wooden planks glistening with algae. A voice filters down, someone singing a folk tune, off-key but warm. Your second light joke drifts out. Looks like we got a live stream from 600 BCE, no subscription needed. The seahorse tilts its head, unimpressed. As you continue upward, the light intensifies until you can see the island's rocky shoreline refracted overhead like a mirage. You glimpse stone steps carved into cliff, disappearing beneath the tide. Some steps are broken, some still sharp. Historians still argue whether such steps were merely utilitarian or part of processional routes for coastal sanctuaries now lost to erosion. In the wavering mirror above, they look like stairs to a different sky. Your seahorse nudges your hand and darts sideways into a curtain of bubbles rising from a fissure. On the other side, a small school of silver fish swirls in a tight ball, flashing like coins tossed into a fountain. You remember that mainstream fact about pilgrims throwing coins or small offerings into spring for luck. Here, it's as though the ocean has minted its own change. You run your fingers through the fishball, which parts around you like soft confetti. Your third light joke. Poseidon's vending machine only takes scales, no cash. Past the fish, the water opens into a broad blue corridor. Above, the island silhouette drifts away. You feel the pull of currents leading seaward, back toward deeper water. The seahorse swims steadily, its fins making tiny shoo sounds against the flow. With each flick, you feel yourself easing further from the noise of the surface world, as if the stories above are fading into static and only the slow rhythm of the ocean remains. A faint glow appears ahead, a palace of coral and light rising from the sea floor like a city built of candle wax. Its towers curve outward, encrusted with shells and pearls. Small fish dart in and out of windows. This must be Poseidon's coral court, where your tiny courier began its day. The seahorse straightens its back and flicks its fins with renewed energy, eager to finish its errand. You follow, noting how the palace seems both enormous and intimate, like a miniature model magnified. Coral arches form a gateway, each one carved or grown into wave patterns. As you cross the threshold, the water stills. Sounds dampen to a soft heartbeat. You realize you're entering the final stretch of this meandering journey, and a part of you wants to slow down, to savor the last twists of myth and current before the story dims completely. Inside Poseidon's coral court, everything moves at a slower tempo, as though the water itself thickens to honey. Great columns of red and ivory coral rise like tree trunks, their branches forming high vaults. Beams of filtered sunlight slant down through openings, catching in drifting flakes of plankton until a whole hall looks dusted with gold. Your tiny seahorse straightens, tail uncurling like a banner. It glides forward with deliberate strokes, clearly recognizing home. You notice couriers like your mount everywhere. Other seahorses, some a little larger, some smaller, each with a different pattern of stripes. They flip between coral archways carrying scrolls of kelp, pouches of pearl dust, or tiny conch shell messages. The scene makes you think of a sleepy post office. First light joke. So this is Poseidon's undersea FedEx hub. No shipping delays, just currents. At the center of the hall, a raised dais holds a low-thrown car from a single massive clamshell. It's empty right now, but a ring of minor sea spirits hovers nearby, discussing something in ripples and flickers of light. Your seahorse circles once and stops near a pedestal shaped like a nautilus. Around it, dozens of scrolls float gently, tethered by strands of sea silk. It unwraps its tail, dropping the pebble it picked up at the urchin maze. The last is deliveries. The pebble sinks into a small cup on the pedestal and glows briefly, then dims. A mainstream fact rises. The Greeks used pebbles, sephoi, for voting, counting, and even as tokens of passage. Historians still argue whether certain seaside sanctuaries use such tokens for oracles. Drop a stone in a bowl and receive an omen. Watching the pebble settle into its coral cup, you feel as though a vote has been cast, an errand marked complete. Your quirky tidbit floats in. In a few obscure coastal villages, people once believed tiny seahorses carried wishes to the sea god if you whispered them into a shell and set adrift. Here, the myth feels literal. You've been whispering your own wishes all along without realizing. A gentle current stirs and a school of glassy fish forms letters in the water for a moment. No alphabet, you know, more like curling runes, then dissolves. Your second light joke, underwater notifications. Even Poseidon's spam folder is prettier than ours. Your seahorse drifts closer to you, fins brushing your wrists like a cat nuzzling a hand. It seems to exhale, bubbles rising in a slow column. Around you, other couriers settle, some curling into coral niches to sleep. The hall is not bustling so much as breathing. Everything sways in unison. The coral, the sea silk, the minor spirits, like a giant organism in a shallow dream. At the far end of the chamber, a wide archway opens onto a corridor lined with pale anemones. Beyond it, you glimpse a dim blue expanse peppered with drifting lights. The current from that direction feels slower, thicker, and cooler. Your seahorse turns its snout that way, then back to you. Its eyes, tiny black beads, blink once. You feel the question hanging. Follow or stop? Third light joke. You're asking me if I want the dessert course of this myth? Of course. The seahorse flicks its tail, pleased. You cast one more look around the coral court. Scrolls float like lazy feathers. Columns shimmer. The empty clamshell throne glows faintly, as though someone might slip into it at any moment. You realize you haven't seen Poseidon himself once. Only his errands, his minor couriers, his echoes. Maybe that's the point. Myths run on the unnoticed labor of small creatures and stray currents. Without them, the big names drift apart. You ease forward, following the seahorse toward the archway. The anemones sway aside as you pass, releasing faint sparks that cling to your skin like starlight before dissolving. Beyond the arch, the water deepens to a cobalt blue. Sound narrows to a low hum. Your limbs feel heavier, but in a comforting way, like sinking into a thick blanket. You can sense the story's tempo shifting down again. Your seahorse glides a little ahead, its tail glowing faintly from some bioluminescent dust it picked up at the festival. It looks back once, as if making sure you're still there. You nod without thinking, and it turns toward the deep with the last leg of your ride. The drift into mythic sleep awaits. The cobalt corridor deepens until colors drain away into velvety navy. Your little seahorse glides more slowly now, each flick of its fins stretching into long pauses. The water is cooler, denser, and tastes faintly of minerals and far-off storms. Tiny pinpoints of light drift past. Plankton, fragment of phosphorescent jelly, and occasional motes of sand released from some distant shelf collapse. Everything moves like dust in a sunbeam slowed down to a heartbeat. You trail a hand through the current and feel it slip like silk over your skin. The seahorse no longer carries messages or performs tricks. It simply leads, its tail swaying in a slow pendulum. A mainstream fact surfaces. Greek sailors describe the wine-dark sea in Homer not because of color alone, but because late light on the Aegean can indeed shimmer like diluted wine. Historians still argue whether Homer meant literal hue, poetic mood, or a lost idiom for stormy. Here, in the dimness, you can see all three interpretations drifting together. Shapes rise out of the blue, a tumbled column, a carved lintel, and a slab half covered in sand. They aren't spectacular, just sleepy remnants of something once above water. A quirky tidbit floats up. A few fringe theorists claim these scattered stones are fragments of a pre-Hellenic lighthouse network that guided mythical creatures as much as ships. No evidence, of course, but the thought of a seahorse navigation system makes you smile. First light joke. Poseidon's smallest steed following ancient GPS. Turn left at the drowned pillar. The seahorse pauses above the slab and lets bubbles rise. The bubbles drift upward, slow as soap, catching faint glows from the plankton. You feel your own thoughts drifting upward with them. The noises of the surface world, phones, cars, the sharp edges of the day, seem impossibly far away. Your eyelids grow heavier. Second light joke, a murmur. If my sleep app could bottle this silence, it'd be 5 stars easy. The current eases even more. You realize you're no longer swimming. The water itself cradles you, moving you forward in a gentle cradle motion. The seahorse drifts closer, its tiny head resting for a moment against your palm. The gesture is small but final. Its errand done, its escort offered. In the dimness, you see not a pet or a courier, but a living comma, a pause in Poseidon's sentence, letting you catch your breath before the end. A school of silverfish passes overhead, flashing like loose change in slow motion. They circle once, then disperse into the dark. Your third light joke comes out as a yawn. Looks like the ocean's tipping us for a good ride. The seahorse gives a soft flick of its fins, the underwater version of a chuckle. The last thing you notice before everything blurs is the faint hum of the sea, a tone so low it's almost a feeling. It seeps into your bones, untying knots you didn't know you carried. The corridor widens into a soft, blue-black chamber where no edges remain. Here the water is neither warm nor cold, neither moving nor still. It simply holds you. You and the seahorse drift together. Your bodies a pair of commas in an unfinished myth. No heroic climax. No thunder hooves or waves. Just a minor creature leading you gently through forgotten corridors until the world becomes a slow heartbeat. You feel the story dim like a candle in thick glass. Your eyes close, or maybe they're already closed. The ride dissolves into quiet. Everything softens. The dark around you is no longer a void but a vast, warm blanket. Currents fade to faint threads. Even the glows of plankton dim to sleepy embers. You can feel your breath slowing, matching the pulse of the sea. Each inhalation draws in cool salt and quiet. Each exhalation releases a little more of the day's weight. Your seahorse guide hovers just at the edge of your vision, not gone, just blurred into the water, like a small nightlight in a darkened room. You drift without moving, letting the ocean's hush carry you deeper into stillness. Thoughts come and go like bubbles rising, popping before they reach the surface. The floor of sand beneath you feels like a mattress that stretches to infinity. Overhead, no roof, only slow-moving stars of bioluminescence. The myth has done its work. No need to follow plot or remember names. All that remains is rhythm. Your heartbeat, the sea's breath, the quiet flick of a tiny fin somewhere nearby. As you sink further into this slow cradle, words lose their edges, turning to murmurs. The small jokes you made, the facts you gathered, the debates historians still argue, all of it drifts upward and away. What stays is a sense of being lightly held, of floating on the calm side of a story. You can linger here as long as you need. The seahorse has no schedule, neither do you. Let the water close around you, a gentle hush. Let your eyelids become heavy. Let sleep take you the way the tide takes a shell, gradually, without force, until you are simply part of the ocean's quiet.